I love learning from people who have been there and done that at a high level. So today we have author and speaker Cody Lowry, and he's going to talk to us about really how to progress in our career and in our life through the art of schmoozing.
Welcome to Advance with Mike Acker, the podcast designed to help entrepreneurs, business leaders, and professionals alike break through barriers by improving their practical leadership skills and increasing confidence in speaking. Your host is a best-selling author, executive coach, and founder of the Advance Public Speaking School and Advantage Publishing Group, two companies dedicated to providing an edge for leaders. Find out more about Mike at mikeacker.com. Now here's your host, Mike Acker.
Hey, welcome, Cody. I'm so glad that you are here with me today.
I'm delighted to be here, Mike.
Hey, before we dive into a little bit of your story, which is fascinating, including growing up in poverty and an audition at Saturday Night Live, before we dive into that, talk to us about one of the key topics that you write about in your book on schmoozing. What does it mean to schmooze?
Hey, thanks, Mike. So the name of the book is Schmooze, What They Should Teach at Harvard Business School. And there's a lot of sizzle in the book. Getting a baseball signed by the Pope, carrying the torch in the Olympic torch relay, getting a Super Bowl ring from one of NFL's Hall of Fame coaches, carrying the torch in the Olympics, auditioning, as you mentioned, for Saturday Night Live, teeing it up at Augusta National. Just a lot of sizzle in the front, but really what I've done, Mike, is I've redefined the word schmooze. Schmooze comes from the Yiddish word schmoozen, which means to chat idly in a friendly, persuasive manner to gain, friendship or some sort of advantage. And for me, it's completely different. It's about a winning smile. It's about making a great first impression. It's about building relationships. It's about schmoozing from the podium and really how important that is for not just young and upcoming professionals, but also our children and then our grandchildren, if that fits. My good friend Nito Quibane, Dr. Quibane from High Point University, he said, Cody, today we live in the most connected society in the history of the world, and yet we are more disconnected than ever before. So Schmooze, Mike, is about hearkening back to the days when we looked people in the eye, we greeted them with a smile, our word was our bond, and our relevancy wasn't based on looks and likes.
That's a great definition, because sometimes either people have no idea what that means to schmooze, or they have a bad connotation of what it is.
Right.
Kind of like they're going to be like a brown nosing, kind of like they're always kind of, but you're talking more. It's eye to eye, it's face to face, it's connection. Give us a couple keys of schmoozing, and then we'll go into your story. Like, what is it? If someone said, I need to do that, I need to put myself eye to eye, I need to win people over, kind of like what you talk about, comparable to how to win friends and influence people. What are some keys to doing that?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's about being genuine. And you're right, there are people who have a bad connotation of the word, but the common denominator with my new definition is being genuine and not a BS artist and, always looking out for the other guy. In the book, there's at least 2 or 3 stories where, I've actually gone in and helped people down in their luck. And I think that's part of the whole new schmooze personality.
I like that. I like that whole genuine aspect is definitely something that I mean, nowadays with social media and such, sometimes I'll turn on social media and I'll just see the best of somebody. And of course,
right,
in my YouTube videos, I'm not talking about like, hey, I had a bad day today. And, so sometimes we feel like we're only seeing the good or we're seeing the fake. And you're talking about this genuine connection. So before we dive into more of that, and I wanted to start out with this question first, but let's hear a little bit about your story, because when I was reading your story and you talk about your book, you actually come from quite the background. and you've been through some hard knocks in life. And so can you tell us
Well,
a little bit about that upbringing and a little bit about why and how you were able to maintain the positivity? You've been called the Pied Piper of positivity. So how did you maintain that in the midst of some
well,
difficult
let's
situations?
first of all talk about people's stories. And, since I've written the book, I've had numerous occasions to sit down with people and listen to their stories. And, everyone has adversity in their life, and nobody gets a hall pass. And when I was starting out in Detroit, Michigan, I thought I was born into a family of privilege. My mother's father was superintendent of schools in Detroit for 30 years. He was the first president of Wayne State University, and there's a high school actually in Detroit named after my grandfather. And so my mother's family was really, while they didn't have the money that typical blue buds at the time had, the Fords and the Fishers and a lot of these automotive giants, they had a lot of stature in the community. And, my grandfather was always a welcome guest at the podium, but also invited to, all the big social events in Detroit. My mother actually made her debutante. And, then as she got a little older, she met my father, Emery, at a Camp Chicopee in northern Michigan, and they fell in love. And that's about as nice a spin as I can put on it, because it was downhill from there. They moved to Florida. They both became alcoholics within a 7-year period. In a 7-mile radius, we moved 32 times. We
32
actually lived
times in how long?
in a 7-year period.
Oh my gosh, I hate moving.
Yeah, that's why I'm a little crazy now, right? And we actually lived in 2 places twice. I can remember coming home with my little brother Mike, who just called me about 15 minutes ago. And Mike, we didn't live there anymore, right? There were chains on the door. I can remember actually moving Christmas Day, and we were moving, and then my mother was all upset. What about the Christmas tree? What about the Christmas tree? And my dad, who had a violent temper, and he might have been under the influence then of a little Christmas cheer. He ran into the house. He grabbed the Christmas tree, lights, tinsel. You're too young to remember what the heck tinsel is, but tinsel and all. And he threw the Christmas tree on the back of the truck, and there off we were to another location. And I tell people my dad had a lot of talent. Paying the rent wasn't one of them. And but my dad finally left us, I guess, when I was around 8. We were in Florida, and my mom, for the first time in her life, had to go to work. And my other siblings, we all started doing odd jobs. And then at age 11, I got my big opportunity, Mike. I became a newspaper salesman for the Miami News. Now, the Miami News is basically then, years ago, and now, if it's still a newspaper, I don't know. It's basically a fish wrapper, especially when you compare it to the Miami Herald, one of their competitors, and also the Fort Lauderdale News. But at age 11, I used to sell papers at it's called the Sunrise Shopping Center. It's now called the Galleria. And I was pretty good at it. I'd sell my papers out every day, and then on Saturday I'd get 35 papers. And my goal before I left home, to go home, I'd want to sell all of those 35 papers. And so I realized at age 11 that no didn't necessarily mean no. I realized that it takes a lot of hard work. And then I realized then really the power of persistence. People would go by and I'd say, paper, sir, paper, ma'am. This is the Miami News, Blue Street edition. And if they kept walking past me and ignoring me, like maybe 95% of the people did, I'd say, sir, would you buy a paper if I told you where you got your shoes, what state you were born in, and how many birthdays you've had? Well, Mike, for a nickel, you'd probably bite, right? And I'd say you got your shoes on your feet, you were born in the state of infancy, and you've only had one birthday the day you were born. Now, if we have time, I got, and so that worked.
That's the
And I got to
schmooze.
tell you,
That's the winning
schmoozing.
people over. That's the eye to eye. That's that genuineness.
Yeah. And so you learn some things along the way. And one of the big things I learned selling newspapers was, and I mentioned this earlier, is to, really look out for the other guy. One Saturday, my manager gave me 50 papers and he wanted me to sell 50 papers. And Mike, I told him there wasn't any way I could do that. But he gave me the old Newt Rockney speech, and, off I went that Saturday morning, and I walked that mall back and forth and back and forth. And I pitched some people twice. I couldn't remember if I hit them up again, And then it was getting around 6 o'clock, and I was dead tired. I had 12 papers left, and I had an opportunity to maybe go across the street to a very popular restaurant called Wolfie's. It was a Jewish delicatessen, and try to sell the rest of my papers. So I'm going across the busy Sunrise Shopping Center or Sunrise Boulevard, and much to my surprise, there in front of Wolfie's restaurant is a guy selling the early edition of the Sunday Miami Herald. Now, Mike, I got to tell you, the Miami Herald at that time was bigger than the New York Times. It had, 1,000 sections, every advert imaginable. And this guy had the papers. They were stacked up to the awning. And, the smart thing for this 11-year-old kid to do would to be, walk away and go home with my tail between my legs. And, maybe another day I'll sell 50. But I didn't do that. I was persistent, right? So 10 feet across from him, I set up my papers. And I got to tell you, I must have looked like the Artful Dodger. I needed a haircut for sure. I had paper ink all over me, and, I'm chewing gum and, all kinds of stuff. And everybody that comes out of the restaurant, I give an enthusiastic pitch to. Miami News, Blue Street edition. I didn't say Saturday because I knew nobody would buy the paper when they could get a Sunday Herald. Incidentally, the guy wasn't even pitching the Herald. People were coming up and buying them left and right as they came out. So I was there about 25 minutes, and I said, you know what, I better just head out. So I was down gathering up my newspapers, my 12 newspapers, and this guy comes blowing out of the restaurant, and he's in a hurry to go someplace. And I go, Miami News, Blue Street edition, and he keeps going. And Mike, I went after him. I said, sir, would you buy a paper if I told you where you got your shoes, what state you were born in, and how many birthdays you've had? He turned around so abruptly, I thought he was going to hit me. And then in a tone that didn't match that first look, he said, son, how many newspapers do you have left? I said, sir, I have 12 papers left. He said, that's exactly how many I want. And then I want you to go home. That is something that is so vivid in my memory. Wow. And I think, part of, what made me the schmoozer and the person I am today.
That's so powerful. I mean, it gives me like the chills even listening, just the heart of the gentleman right there, and your persistence, your hard work, and then him seeing it and him matching that and figuring out what to do with that. That's incredible, powerful story. And you kept that up. You kept that positivity. You had those reassurances along the way. Now, as you progress in your story, you got to tell us a little bit about the Saturday Night Live trials out there. My wife and I have been watching that for years. I watched it as a teenager. A lot of times it's not very good, but it's a habit now. So, well, I
got to tell you, in my earlier career, my earlier life, I did stand-up comedy. And Mike, that was before, you could actually
I can tell you got the personality to get up there and do that. And which one of the things that people should take your book, not only for the stories, but also because they're going to learn how to get themselves out of that spot. Actually, let me go back here just a moment before we go there.
Sure.
One of the things I love about sales is sales teaches you that rejection is not fatal, and that rejection is part of life. And a lot of people that I get to work with, they've gone through a lot of life without a ton of rejection. And then they're in these like corporate positions and they feel the imposter syndrome, which is ultimately in some ways the fear of rejection. How did you deal with that rejection and that putting yourself out there day in and day out and not get discouraged?
Yeah, and I think number one, I'm naive, right? I said, "Oh, it'll be better tomorrow," and maybe it wasn't always better tomorrow. But people listening in and looking at your show, I think a great quote, and it's a Japanese proverb, something they ought to take into consideration and make it part of their overall mindset. Fall down 7 times, get up 8.
Yeah.
And I've always had that feeling that, you know what, I'm down today, but I'll be up tomorrow. And sales is about perseverance, and it's about sticking with it, and it's about understanding that, a lot of times it's a numbers game. And I can tell you that if we want to pivot and get back to Saturday Night Live, in the book I talk about the secret sauce. And the secret sauce, Mike, is about building relationships that last. And I can tell you that it's something that has served me well. I still have clients on the books. I've had them for over 30 years. And number one, you build the relationship. Number two, you get the client to trust you. And number three, you never let them down. I'm going to tell you something that works. And when we talk about building a relationship, Mike, it's not something where, you're talking about 4 months, 5 months, a year to build a relationship. Do you know that people are already making a value judgment about you within the first 35 seconds that they meet you?
Yeah.
And so it's important to have your act together. Whenever I went in to see a new client and maybe a top CEO or whoever it was, when I went into that meeting, Mike, I knew more about that guy than probably the people in their office did. I knew what college he went to. I knew how many kids he had. I knew what charities he belonged to. I knew what social clubs he belonged to. And so I was ready. And sometimes, I'd have to bring it up. And, Mike, how did you get started in this business?
Yeah.
Well, that's schmoozing, right? And you better sit back and you better pack the lunch because they are so excited to talk about themselves. But let me tell you a real win, and it was worth millions of dollars to me. I was invited to go to North Carolina, Asheville, North Carolina, at the Grove Park Inn. Toyota dealer called me, and I had done work with him in Florida. And he said, "Hey, 10 of us are getting together, 10 dealerships are getting together, and, we're having dinner at the Grove Park Inn, and, we'd love to have you come up and, meet everybody." And it was a real casual invitation, right? And so I got to this place. It was about 6:30. I was running a little late. I get in there, and with the exception of this one gentleman, I didn't know the other 9 dealers. But I can tell you, during the cocktail hour and dinner, I got to know most of them. If you were a fly on the wall and watched me talk to somebody I've never talked to before, I ask questions. Where are you from? What did your dad do? And all the time I'm taking this all in to hopefully be used at a different time. Or, if I'm at a restaurant, I just want to make the people feel good that I care about them and, and I'm interested in them. So at dinner time, Mike, one of the dealers said, "Who'd you bring, Cody?" And I thought that was an odd question. I said, "Who did I bring?" My wife was back in Florida. And he said, "Yeah, for the presentation tomorrow." Well, Mike, there was a presentation for the Toyota dealer's account. It was worth millions. Big national agency, who I won't mention, a multi-billion-dollar agency, had the account. And they had invited 4 agencies to come and pitch. I was the only one that was invited to dinner. And I got to tell you, I was thinking, oh my gosh, I don't have any creative. I don't know anything about the Charlotte market. I mean, woe is me, right? Put my chin in my chest. And I went back up to the hotel room, and I was seriously considering backing off for the reasons that I just outlined. And then I thought, you know what? You're ready for this, Cody. You've been getting up in front of people your whole life. You've met everybody. You have a distinct advantage over. And when I say this, a distinct advantage over the competition, absolutely. I knew these guys already. I knew their fan. I knew all that kind of stuff. So in advertising, Mike, you either want to be first on or you want to be last on. I was last. And in the meantime, I'd met the other agencies, and they had 4 or 5 people with each group, and the people with the storyboards and the media people and what have you, and they kind of dismissed me. Who's this guy? And so anyway, I was last to go in. I walk into the room. Hey, Cody! Hey, I'm high-fiving, and I must have been pretty good, And so I get up there, and what I did have is I had what we call a sizzle reel, and it was probably as good or better than any of the other agencies. And I just done it. I had my business card, and I had my sizzle reel, right? So I got up there, and I didn't know the creative, but I did know our creative strategy, and I went over that in great detail. I didn't know the Charlotte market, as I said, but I did know our media strategy, and I went over that. I went over our attention to our customers, and that's Ritz-Carlton service. And when I was done, they applauded, and I left. And one thing about automobile dealers, for sure, they don't waste 2 or 3 weeks telling you that you got it or you didn't get it. They're making a decision now because they got other things on their plate. And about I guess it was about 45 minutes, a buddy of mine, Joe Bertolami, one of the dealers at the time, told me that the group wanted to see me, and I walked in. They closed the door. They all stood up and they applauded. They said, "You're our new agency." Well, Mike, I can tell you, if I had not built those relationships, built those early, and so focused on it, because that's what I've been doing my whole life, I promise you somebody else would have had that account.
Wow. That relationship, I love that you bring this whole schmoozing back to relationships. And so often we can get going into so much of just what's got to be done, what's the next deal, and you're bringing it back to that relationship, and that the lifetime value is not just in terms of finances, but the lifetime value of doing business with people that you've enjoyed doing business with for a long time. Yeah, I think absolutely that's fantastic.
The second excuse me if I could, very briefly, but get the client to trust you. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, whether it's in your personal life or it's in business. And when I had my agency, we had from time to time, as good as we were, as good as we thought we were, we'd screw up on occasion, right? And I'd get somebody coming in, oh, we screwed up the creative and blah blah blah, or the media buy was wrong, or it didn't run, or blah blah blah. And what do? Well, what I'd always taught my people is you do the right thing and you tell the truth. There's no little white lies. And that has worked for me, and just being dead honest with somebody. Sometimes I'd be in a meeting, and the client would come in with this whiz bang idea, and you don't want to hurt his feelings, but I was straight up with them that that wasn't really very good, and here's why. And so that they trust you, and then never let them down. Some people you're never going to please, right? But right. For the most part, I've been able to do that. Sometimes you get a call, even today. I mean, I say even today, even now, I'll get a call on a Sunday, and it's a dealer or different client, and I look down. I have a choice to make. I can pick that thing up. Don't you realize it's Sunday, or not pick it up? And I'm their blankie, and I know that. So I'll pick it up. So build the relationship, get the client to trust you, never let them down.
That's incredible. Great stuff. I love that you've taken all of this and the stories, condensed a lot of it, put it into into a book. I thought it was interesting, your subtitle on what Harvard Business School doesn't teach you, but they should. And talk to us about, why do you think that this area of this kind of relationship building is ignored? When we're listening to it right now, we're all enthralled. We're listening to it going, yeah, this makes sense. Why do you think it's ignored?
Well, I think it's ignored for the simple reason that we are totally ensconced, and I say we, and I'm not just singling out millennials or younger generations, but we are totally ensconced in this whole social world, and really, I think it's a detriment to a lot of the younger generations. I think it's 18 to 22, the highest risk of suicide, and people are they're just so involved in in the whole social aspect of their life that they don't develop their personality. It's like I mentioned Nito saying that, we're in the most connected society in the history of the world, yet we're more disconnected than ever before. I can remember I had an agency about 7 years ago. They bought my group, and I went up to be president of their retail division, and I've got 25 of these younger generation people I'm working with, and they're all on their cell phones, and they come into the meetings and they got their cell phones. I quickly changed that. They're a lot of them haven't really developed any of their social skills. You walk by them in the morning, and they got their head down and they're walking, and I scare them, good morning, like that. And, and it was so
Let me push back there a little bit.
Yeah.
Because my dad is 73, and he's still working as a trial attorney. Now he's got the gift of schmooze, but I mean, I'll walk in and he's just as guilty. It's not just the 22-year-olds and the 18-year-olds. It's the 50-year-olds, the 70-year-olds, it's the 60-year-olds, it's the 40-year-olds. I think just my own personal pushback on some of this is that it's sometimes we segregate the generations, but the generations that which is living right now, and all of us are immersed, all of us are tempted. I mean, right now we're in a virtual communication. We're not pressing the flesh, to use that old-fashioned term right there, we're a handshake. I mean, there's so much good and so much bad. And I know you're not saying get rid of it because you were an ad agency. You're just saying don't lose the humanity in the midst of this. And don't just rely on this external facade.
Absolutely. It's exactly what I'm saying.
Because I think you're right. There's a lot of people building an external shell of themselves. I talk about that in my next coming book, a shell of themselves, but they haven't internalized that who they are. What do you think goes into really figuring out who you are? I mean, at this point in time, you're the king of schmooze. You know what that means. You know what that is. If you're talking to a 25-year-old Cody and you're saying, develop yourself, be yourself, what does that look like to be yourself?
Well, that might be another area, but as far as
it is.
Yeah. So, if I was sitting, well, I've done it, sitting down with a part of the younger generation and mentoring to them. I do encourage them to be more open in life in general, and to seek out people and find out what their story is all about, and learn from it. And, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And I can tell you that when they go to these job interviews, I was interviewed on a TV station out of Dallas just recently, and it was advice on, to the younger generation, what to do with a Zoom interview. Well, my God, have you seen some of these kids that kind of get on an interview? I mean, you think they're going out to a rodeo or something. And, you gotta be prepared. You gotta look the part. And I'm not saying you have to wear a coat and a tie, but, at least look like you care. And then I talk a little bit on the interview about what I had mentioned earlier. Know something about that company. Know exactly the verticals that they're in. Know, and be somewhat more aggressive than perhaps you are now, and ask pertinent questions that are going to affect your life if you do end up with the job.
I think that's a fantastic advice on being more aggressive. A lot of times in interview positions, whether it's in live or virtual, and I do a lot of prepping for virtual, and it is the interviewer comes in with the questions. And so that is always putting the interviewee on the defense. But when you ask questions back and it raises you to that level and you're more aggressive in that relationship in a good, positive way. And I can see that that's been one of the keys to success. So you've been in marketing, you're all about know yourself, get yourself out there, know the other person, do the hard work, be positive, build these relationships, schmooze. I think it's a fantastic story. Give us let's go back to SNL because we never
I was wondering when were we going to do that, Mike. I thought maybe you forgot.
No, I even wrote myself a little note. So we got to go back to that story because, if we ended right now, people would be like, what happened?
Yeah. You'd have to have me on again. So I got to tell you, in the beginning of the book, we talk about all those things. I don't mention Saturday Night Live. And when I run into people, they go, gosh, you should have had Saturday Night Live in the front of your book. So I'm a stand-up comedian, right? And what I was saying earlier is back then, you really didn't have a regular job in comedy. You didn't have the comedy club. So if you did get a gig, you may have gotten an honorarium. And my first gig is a funny one, but I don't think we have enough time. I'm going to move forward to Saturday Night Live in New York. My wife and I had already made the decision that we were moving to Las Vegas. I'd spent some time out there, and I just felt that was more of my group, right? And with that said, I said, you know what? I've never been to New York. I said, I need to get up there and just kind of kick the tires and see what's going on. And so with very little funds, off I went to New York. The first thing I did, the first night I went to the Improv, which is a comedy club. And then I went to Catch a Rising Star, which was the hottest comedy club in the world. And they actually let me get on and perform at the comedy club. And that's another story. It's in the book. It's a good one. I had a big top talent came. I've been waiting for 2 hours to get on. And they said, hey, Mr. Bumblebee is going to be on Carson. And, he has to get in front of you. And he absolutely bombed. So much so that he just finally said, I apologize. He said, I'm going home. I'm going to, come up with some different material. Thank you very much. And they're going to me, get out there. And I was pretty high energy guy, right? But in any event, and it went well, especially when I did my fast cell vasectomy for $14.95. They all like that one. Yeah, you get antiseptic, scalpel, and while they last, a win button from the Association of Voluntary Super. But anyway, the next day, I've got a couple days left in New York, and I'm trying to, meet people. And all of a sudden, Mike, just like it was as casual as maybe I ought to get a haircut. Maybe I should have my nails done. Maybe I should audition for Saturday Night Live. That's what I was saying earlier. Sometimes being a little naive isn't so bad. So, because if you really had a half a brain in your head, you'd know it wasn't possible to audition for Saturday Night Live within the next 48 hours, right? So I called the show at Rockefeller Center, and I got right through to a guy by the name of John Head, who heads up all the talent for the show. He's an English guy, nice gentleman. So I get him on the phone. I think it was a mistake, right? And I'm not exactly sure how I prefaced it, but anyway, I get him on the phone, and I said, Mr. Head, my name is Cody Lowry, and I'm from Tampa, Florida, and I said, while I'm up here, I only have 48 hours, and I'd love to audition for the show. I've got a real winner for you. I do Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter might be your next president, and blah 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 blah. And he goes, Cody, why don't you give me a call tomorrow? Fair enough. And I thought, wow, I'm going to pull this off. I called tomorrow, right? He's busy. He's out to lunch. He isn't here. And now I'm getting the typical,
Yeah.
see you later, alligator. So that night I thought, you know what? And this is before the advent of cell phones, and everybody, had telephones at their house, and most of us weren't unlisted. And guess what? I decided I would call him if I could find his number, and just talk to him again. So I got him. I looked and he was in the book, and I got the number, and I called, and he picks up the phone. Mr. Head, this is Cody Lowry. I said, I found your number in the phone book, and he's not nearly as excited as I am, right? And I said, I'm only going to be up here a little bit longer. Is there any way that I could just show you what I can do? And he's actually, first of all, he goes, "You are amazing." And then he said to me, he said, call my assistant and we'll set up a meeting around 1 or 2. So I did. And I got to tell you, I've always been, like I said, maybe too naive or what have you to be scared. But when I was going up that elevator, I started getting that cotton mouth. And I started thinking, what are you doing? You have no business being here. I mean, they have some of the biggest names in comedy that are on this show. But once that elevator door opened, Mike, there was a sense of calmness that came over me, and I felt like I belonged. And I went up and, I had a big hello smile for the gal at the front desk, and I'm here to see John Head, Cody Lowry. And so they ushered me into a room. Didn't have a stage, but it had a platform. And he came in, and what a delightful guy he was. And I'm going through he says, "Let me see what you got," something like that. And so I do my vasectomy, and he liked it. And then I pivoted to, what I originally pitched him was the real sizzle, Jimmy Carter. "My name is Jimmy Carter. Always tell the truth. If I tell a lie, I don't know the truth." Now, a lot of people think I'm prejudiced, come from the South. I want the American people to understand one thing. Of my 4 children, 2 of them are black. And then it went on and on, and he loved it. And he wasn't rolling in the floor. I could tell that he genuinely liked me. He said, "Cody, I want 2 more people to see that." He said, "I'll be right back." And he brought 2 other gentlemen into the room. I wasn't introduced to either one of them, but he said, "Do the Carter again." And so I did. And they laughed, and they laughed. And he said, "You nailed Carter." And he said, "Listen, I'm going to follow you around town. Let's see if he actually becomes president." Well, I went back to Florida, and I got into the automobile business, and that was prior to the advertising business. And they offered me a king's ransom to come in, and I was general sales manager in short order. And a lot of people will ask me, "Mike, well, don't you regret not pursuing it?" I mean, my goal was to get out and not be a stand-up comedy for my whole life, but to get out there, and maybe that would lead to a sitcom or what have you. And I look at them, and I tell them, and I look right in their eye, and I said, "I have no regrets at all." Yeah. And if you look at my book, I dedicate it to my 11 grandchildren. Yeah. And I said, that trumps anything, even headlining at Caesar's Palace, right? So I made the right decision for sure.
Oh, that's great. How fun. If you're just pulling some nuggets from it, just that naive, or that not thinking about so much in our head, we get so much in our head, like it's going to go bad. And just that naivety, that belief in self, that positivity, that genuineness, all of that schmoozing. This has been so fun, Cody, just hearing your stories, hearing your heart, hearing the message behind schmoozing, and putting a really good thing to that. Any kind of final things that you just want to leave to the audience here as we wrap up our time here together?
I don't know if there's anything that I could embellish from what I've already said, but my tagline is, "May the schmooze be with you."
Nice. I love it. Well, this has been so fun. Thank you, Cody. I really do appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you, Mike. It's been a joy.
And to all of our listeners and our viewers, thank you so much for taking some time to watch and to listen and making this part of your week. take time to like, subscribe, share, comment. Make sure that you pass this on to somebody who could just learn a little bit and use a little bit of that schmooze. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Advance with Mike Acker, a podcast designed to provide an edge for leaders through improving practical leadership skills and increasing confidence in speaking. Mike is a best-selling author and business owner who has helped many leaders increase their skills and their confidence, propelling them to new heights in their personal and professional endeavors. Join an incredible group of professionals taking the steps to become better leaders at connect.stepstoadvance.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.